Assistant Professor Marwa Hamid Al-Khafaji. The subject is about food microbiology for the fourth stage students of the College of Science Biology Department in the University of Baghdad. Our sixth lecture about foodborne diseases, which may be classified into foodborne infections and intoxications. We may define a foodborne disease as any gastrointestinal disturbances resulting from the recent ingestion of food. Have a variety of causes. They may be overeating, allergies, nutritional deficiencies, actual poisoning by chemicals, or toxic plants, toxic animals, or those toxins produced by bacteria, infestation by animal parasites, and infection by microorganisms. Bacterial foodborne infections and foodborne intoxications will be identified as the intoxication referred to foodborne illnesses caused by the presence of bacterial toxin preformed in the food, while the bacterial food infection refers to the foodborne illness caused by entrance of the bacteria or the microorganism into the body through ingestion of contaminated food and the reaction of the body to their presence or their metabolites. So in the intoxication, the toxin, the bacterial toxin, preformed in food and ingested with it, while in the infection, the bacteria entrance to the body must enter the body alive with the contaminated food. Food infections may be divided into two types in another way. The first type, those in which food doesn't ordinarily support the growth of pathogen. So it merely carries them, only carries the pathogens, such as those causing tuberculosis, diphtheria, dysentery, typhoid fever, brucellosis, cholera, infectious hepatitis, and acute fever. In these infections, the food serves as carrying the pathogen only. It doesn't support them. While in the second type, in which food can serve as a culture media for the pathogen. So it supports the microbial growth to numbers will increase the likelihood or the chance of infection for the food consumers, as it happened in Salmonella, Vibrio parahemolyticus, or enteropathogenic E. coli. The outbreaks from food infections of the second type are likely to be more explosive than the outbreaks of the first type. The simple comparison between foodborne infections and intoxications. The first column about the infections and the second column about the intoxications. Number 1, entrance of pathogenic microbe contaminating food into the body and the reaction of the body tissues to their presence. While in the foodborne intoxications, the presence of bacterial toxin preformed in the food. In the foodborne infections, a long period of incubation, while in the intoxication, there is short incubation periods, maybe minutes to hours, because there is no microbe to be multiplicate or produce anything. It is merely toxin produced in the food, and the person ingested that toxin with the food. So it need a few minutes or hours to exhibit intoxication complications or symptoms, usually characterized by fever, the infection, while intoxication there is no fever. The fever is related to LPS in the gram-negative bacteria, so it is more likely with the gram-negative infections, while a toxin seldom to cause fever. The infections can either be fungal, bacterial, or viral parasitic infections, and we call it bacterial foodborne infection, mycotoxic or mycotic foodborne infections about the fungi, viral foodborne infections, while foodborne intoxications are classified into bacterial intoxications when the toxin preformed in food is a bacterial toxin, fungal intoxications when it is a fungal toxin, chemical intoxication where it is chemical toxin, plant intoxication or toxicant where we ingested a toxicant of a plant, poisonous animals also. These are the foodborne intoxications. We will talking about some cases of the foodborne infections and intoxications. The first one is Staphylococcal food poisoning, SFP. It is an intoxication, not infection, caused by the ingestion of enterotoxin preformed in food during growth of certain strains of Staphylococcus aureus, the causative agent. The toxin termed as enterotoxin because it causes gastroenteritis and inflammation of the lining of the intestinal tract. So, it is an intoxication caused by enterotoxin produced by Staphylococcus aureus. Incidence in food, according to CDC, Center for Disease Control and Prevention, Staphylococcus aureus is a common bacterium found in the nose and or on the skin of about 25% of the population and animals. So it expected to exist at least in low numbers in any or all food products that of animal origin, or in those that not handled handled directly by human, unless heat processing steps are applied to affect their destruction. The incriminated food is bakery products. Symptoms of staphylococcal food poisoning include diarrhea, vomiting, abdominal pain. The incubation period, as it is an intoxication case, symptoms may appear rapidly, sometimes as little as 30 minutes. However, it's typically to take up to 6 hours for symptoms to manifest. Most people get over the food poisoning by staphylococcal enterotoxins in about 2 days. Deaths are very rare in the case of staphylococcal food poisoning. However, there is increased risk for the complication among elderly persons and the small children and the people which of immunocompromised patient. We call them immunocompromised patient of weakened immune system, and pregnant women. The minimum quantity of an enterotoxin need to cause illness in a human is about 20 nanogram. The enterotoxins of staph are proteins, have a remarkably ability to resist heat and acid. Therefore, they may not completely denatured by mild cooking of the contaminated food. Staphylococcus aureus enterotoxins have the ability to induce emesis and gastroenteritis. They are resistant to inactivation by gastrointestinal proteases such as pepsin, trypsin, renin, papain. Thus, they can easily outlast bacteria that produce them. So they are proteins, resist heat and acid, induce emesis, resistant to inactivation by gastrointestinal proteases. Our second foodborne illness is botulism. Botulism is an intoxication case, not infection, intoxication, caused by ingestion of food containing neurotoxin. Here is the toxin is neurotoxin, called botulinum toxin, which is produced by Clostridium botulinum, the causative agent, a gram-positive anaerobe spore-forming rod with oval or to cylindrical terminal spores. Incriminated food in botulism are canned foods. So the case intoxication, the toxin neurotoxin, botulinum toxin. The causative agent, Clostridium botulinum. The incriminated food, canned foods. Botulinum toxin is a protein so powerful that only a tiny amount is sufficient to cause death, because it is absorbed mostly in the small intestine and paralyze involuntary muscles of the body. An important characteristic to botulinum toxin is thermolability. It is sensitive to heat, so heat treatment necessary to destroy this toxin, which is depend on the type of organism produce it and the medium in which it is heated. So it is a protein so powerful toxin cause death because it is paralyze involuntary muscles, so it may cause respiratory muscles to be stopped and heart muscle to be stopped. An important characteristic, it is thermolability, that it is sensitive to heat, can be destroyed by heat. The question why it caused death regarding its thermolability, because it is related to canned foods, and most of us didn't eat canned foods with sufficient heating to destroy such toxin. Therefore it caused death as a result of paralyze the involuntary muscles. So we can control it by heating canned foods. Our third foodborne illness is salmonellosis. It is a foodborne infection, not intoxication, infection caused by Salmonella bacteria. Most of people infected with Salmonella develop diarrhea, fever, vomiting, abdominal cramps, with an incubation period of about 12 to 70 hours after infection. So, live Salmonella enteritidis or Typhimurium must be ingested with food. The incubation period 12 to 72 hours to symptoms to be manifest or appear, which are diarrhea, fever, vomiting, and abdominal cramps. In most cases, illness lasts 4 to 7 days. Most people recover without a treatment. In some cases, diarrhea may be so severe that the patient becomes dangerously dehydrated and must be hospitalized. So it is dangerous about the dehydration. Incriminated food of salmonellosis: poultry, pork, beef, fish, seafood. If the meat is prepared incorrectly or it is infected with bacteria after preparation. Infected eggs, egg products also may be implicated. There are conditions necessary for an outbreak of salmonellosis. 3 conditions, which are: the food must contain or become contaminated with salmonella. The condition number 2 is the bacteria must be there in a considerable numbers, either because contamination with salmonella or more often because growth. These high numbers mean that the food must be a good culture medium. The temperature must be favorable and enough time must be allowed for the appreciable growth. So the third condition, the viable organism must be ingested. First condition, the food must contain or become contaminated with salmonella. The salmonella must be there in considerable numbers, either by contamination or the food support its growth to this considerable number, and with enough time and the temperature and the type of the food. The condition Third condition is viable organism must be ingested. The strains of Salmonella implicated in Salmonellosis are Salmonella enteritidis and Salmonella typhimurium. So typhimurium and enteritidis are the most common. Incubation period of Salmonella enteritidis is typically between 6 to 48 hours. We may prevent Salmonellosis outbreak by 3 steps. Number 1, avoidance of contamination of the food with Salmonella from sources such as diseased human beings, animals, carriers, such as contaminated egg. Number 2, destruction of the organism in food by heat or other means. Number 3, prevention of the growth of Salmonella in food by adequate refrigeration or other means. Our fourth example about foodborne illness is Bacillus cereus foodborne illness. I called it foodborne illness and I didn't determine it as a foodborne intoxication or infection because it causes two syndromes, the intoxication and the infection. You may ask me why. Because when you ingest live bacteria, it will be infection and the toxin will be released in the digestive tract, while when you ingest the preformed toxin with your meal, it will be an intoxication. This foodborne illness caused by consumption of enterotoxins produced by some strains of Bacillus cereus, as I mentioned, either enterotoxins or the whole organism, and it will cause intoxication in your digestive system. The organism produces following enterotoxins involved in a foodborne infection or intoxication: either emetic toxin or diarrheal enterotoxins. It have two diarrheal enterotoxins, hemolysin BL and non-hemolytic enterotoxin, in addition to the emetic toxin. Incriminated food: meat, egg, dairy product, cereal dishes such as rice, spice, mashed potatoes, herbs, vegetables, minced meat, cream, milk puddings. All of them have been involved in Bacillus cereus poisoning. Symptom of disease in a human: two syndromes, either emetic syndrome or diarrhea syndrome. Emetic syndrome is similar to that intoxication, foodborne intoxication. The syndrome is characterized by nausea, vomiting, abdominal cramps, sometimes diarrhea, that occurs 1 to 6 hours. The incubation period 1 to 6 hours, just like intoxication. After consumption of contaminated food, the syndrome is associated with ingestion of rice and pasta-based foods. So the incriminated food: rice, pasta foods. Incubation period 1 to 6 hours. The symptoms: nausea, vomiting, abdominal cramps, sometimes diarrhea. The toxin implicated is emetic toxin. The causative agent is Bacillus cereus. The other syndrome is diarrhea syndrome, which is similar to foodborne infection. The causative agent is Bacillus cereus. The toxins are either hemolytic BL toxin or non-hemolytic diarrhea toxin. In the diarrhea syndrome, patient experience profuse diarrhea, watery stool diarrhea, and abdominal cramps, tenesmus, rarely vomiting here. The incubation period 8 to 16 hours after ingestion of contaminated food. Fever is absent and symptoms resolve within approximately 12 hours. So the second syndrome is similar to foodborne infection. It caused by Bacillus cereus, diarrhea, enterotoxins, either hemolytic or non-hemolytic diarrhea toxin of Bacillus cereus. the incubation period 8 to 16 hours, and the symptoms are profuse diarrhea, watery stool, abdominal cramps, tenesmus with rare vomiting. The toxins related to emetic syndrome is emetic toxin, and to diarrhea syndrome is hemolysin BL enterotoxin or non-hemolytic enterotoxin. Thank you for listening. I'm available for any questions.